Good morning, Ridgewater. We are starting by the water today because apparently half the town has discovered the same question at the same time. What are we doing with it? You have the houses filling in, the school traffic in the morning, the hospital open, store parking lots packed on the weekends, and then right past all of that is one of the best views in town just sitting there like somebody meant to come back with a plan. And listen, nobody's asking for a resort. Nobody needs a boardwalk with souvenir cups and a man selling fudge out of a window. But a trail, a small landing, somewhere to sit for 10 minutes without standing in the dirt, that seems fair. The county says the quieter shoreline is getting another look, and some of the edges near town may finally get cleaned up. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud, just enough that when people say they are going down by the water, it sounds like a place they are supposed to be. Welcome back to Ridgewater County. I think today we have a pretty exciting build ahead of us. We've kind of reached our waterfronts after quite a number of episodes here of just heavy growth, stabilization, and just continued organic development of a small town that grew a little density along the ways of taking on the county seat, and also is very mindful of how we're working out of town. And so, we started to step down. We have our farm here. We have good buffer lanes with tree usage. We've increased our hospital capacity, elder care. Most of our primary services are in pretty reasonable shape. It's not that they can't always be better or anything like that. It's just towns are always evolving, always growing. So, we have city attractiveness, and we're at 34. That's not too bad, not too awful, especially for a small town. And it's not like this is a massive tourist attraction, but I think we can do a little bit for it. And I think that's really going to take us into today's projects, is that little bit of city attractiveness, and what comes with that kind of gives us our finished feel of this town is not just a functioning town, it's a place to live. And so what I had in mind for today's builds and tackling the waterfront of our town is I'm thinking a nature reserve and take advantage of this very unique, very odd land as far as topography goes, which you can see is crazy. But I think a nature reserve is really going to balance that out well and make some sense, and we can give a little bit of life on this end of town that doesn't scream development, or we really came in with our excavation tools and dug in and try to just place things. So I think this is a very good odd land that doesn't have much rhyme, reason, or functionality to it, and get it to give something back to the town. Now, our second project is going to, I think this little section, while the sewage treatment plant is here, I think this is a good little offshoot of the neighborhoods. Plus, these houses were still suffering a little bit, being a little too far away from the park. I think here can be a true kind of water-centric leisure park setting build right here. And we can really kind of make use of another little place that is a hard land use. And so, and then I think just to kind of wrap it out a little bit, I think we're going to just finish out our Walmart a little bit right here. Now, in hindsight, if we'd have taken this build and we'd have put it a little closer to the roadway, we probably could have called it done, and we might could have fit in an extra road of houses or an extra cul-de-sac or something random. But hey, no big deal, and that's what happens when you're building it. It doesn't have to be perfect, and some of the best stuff in city builds, the best organic gameplay can really come from those tiny little mistakes that turn out not to be mistakes, and that's what gives you your character. Okay, well, let's just jump straight in, and we'll start taking on the nature reserve. First, as always, we have to paint our park. So we'll take the small one, do a big outline. We might as well just kind of go ahead and claim all the land that isn't already claimed here on the backside. We'll give the church a little bit of land they kind of own this whole thing in my mind. We'll come down by the bridge. Okay, so that takes care of our district work. I think that kind of covers all the land you would want to cover as a national park, because in a sense, you know, nature reserve and the main building actually says national park on it. But I do think about it as a when I go to build a nature reserve, I do think about it same as a national park. And you know, my area, we're surrounded by national forest, and so I try to always mimic that personal interactions with that woods and what they tend to build and what they tend to manage. At least in my area, they I'm sure every area has a far different budget cap, and it gets a lot of different provisions. And so let's grab our road height. We'll come out about here, and I don't want to come out too far, don't need to. Let's just kind of take care of what the land is trying to give us, so we don't overly mess with the back end. So I think this little cut in should be plenty for us. Okay, so let's go ahead and get a parking lot road going in. And, you know, we still want some reasonable node spacing here, so I think I'm going to jump in about here. And then we still want a little reasonable node spacing here, so I think we'll come off a little before the turn, plenty of room before the church. So we'll come out and we'll curve this in to meet. And so kind of what I had in mind is we'll run a little straight section there, and I think we'll put our main building here. Now, what I'd like to do now is kind of give it that parking that it's going to need for being a national park entrance. So let's now grab our nature reserve pieces. So let's grab the main gate, and we'll start right here. And overall, I think that takes care of, or at least our entrance, as far as starting pathways. But I think for this, I'd rather kind of approach this as, let's put all of our buildings down first, and then we'll kind of run our pathways. The one good thing about nature reserve pathways is they're very conformative to and gentle on running pathways, so we don't have to do a lot of excavation work. It'll do it for us. So let's go ahead and just kind of finish the top up here a little bit. I think I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to give us a little bit more room here, not too much. Like I said, I kind of want to keep it relatively clean, and we'll just kind of tap through here and soften it a little bit. Over here, not so much. That was already like that. I guess we don't want anyone rolling down a cliff. But let's go ahead and grab a very interesting building out of this pack, is the Nature Reserve Museum. So I think we can go ahead and put it right off the parking lot. And so you have your park entrance, and then you have what I think is a very attractive asset. So now it looks like we're going to have to grab this thing and bring it up a little bit with move it, and then we'll clean up the backside once we get all of our buildings in. So I think that gives us a pretty interesting, you know, parking lot entrance, and then your actual entry into the nature reserve itself. But let's go ahead and see what we can do in here. Now, we don't really need our terrain anymore. We want to kind of see where we're putting everything. So, and the backside didn't do too bad there. You know, we'll probably soften that a bit, just to make it make sense right there. But let's come out here to this end first. So we'll grab our park. Let's get this overlay off, and I think we're going to be a little fishing centric. And so we'll add, stay here in this little bay. We might have to manually move a lot of these things, but we'll just put them in, and then once we start running paths, we can make some adjustments. So from here, I would think that we want to take advantage of our viewing decks, because we do have a great view, and not with our borders on, but I do think that the view is something that you would maximize. So let's add one right here, and we'll kind of take it off the cliff a little bit, because that would be neat anyway. So from here, I think we need to start thinking about where would like the first campground in a sense be, because you would still camp, and it probably makes sense to me right here. It's close to the entrance. You're not doing some big giant hike to take the family out and camp. So let's flatten this a little bit. Grab right here. Just kind of push back. Not a ton, just enough for what we need. So let's grab this little campground, and we'll put it up close to the rock, close as we can, just to save on room. And I think that would make a lot of sense. And it's in a low water area, but at the same time, a lot of campgrounds, a lot of RV parks, they are. And so I don't see that as a bad thing. Now, I want to take advantage of this little island too, because it's cool. And being able to, which we'll have to future bridge. And we'd want to take the smallest. That's where they would do it from a financial sense. So, but that'd be a cool hike to come out here. So let's go ahead and put a few nature reserve amenities out here. And I think we'll do another fishing cabin. Kind of be remote about it. We'll put that there. We'll definitely have to probably adjust that. I mean, there's kayaks on the back porch here. You got a couple guys fishing off, but good lord, why are they fishing off about 50 feet? So we'll kind of tweak those as we come back around. I think another viewing deck would make a ton of sense. I think right above this little rock will work pretty well. So we'll tuck this thing back right there. Well, and straight through the trees. Well, let's again fix all that. Let's take a look at the view that we'd be getting. So you can catch the lighthouse way out there, and you have a great view of this open mouth bay of interconnecting to what I would assume is an ocean out here. And we do have a boat in there right now. Let's jump back in here and add a few more things that I think would be pretty cool. So we have two options here. We have this Lookout Tower 1 and Lookout Tower 2. I think we would kind of be on top. And, and this is your more advanced hiker that wants to come up here. I think that one would probably be a little bit better than this one. This is awfully small. Doesn't make a ton of sense. Now I guess we could let this be the first stage that you would come to in the hike, and let it be a little smaller, views a little less, and this is your payoff. So I think that kind of takes care of us pretty well there. Now, if we're going to go ahead and run it all the way through, which ideally I think we should, and we districted it anyway, so we can kind of keep running out. We are, getting a little closer to civilization in a sense, whereas this backside is already starting to develop down and out, so it definitely seems more secluded. But I do think that we would have kind of that next run, in a sense, to another campground that's not too far away. Still quite a ways off the housing, and there's good woods. So I mean, there is good barrier to where it doesn't look like, oh hey man, town's right there. So I think we can put down one more. Let's flatten a little section out here. I don't think we need to be as low as far as cutting down here, but we can grab this one. Kind of bring it up and carve ourselves just enough. So we'll grab that and we'll put this thing in. It looks like we're going to have to get rid of our rock. No problem. I think we have plenty and we can always add one back. So that takes care of right there. I think we would probably have one more. To me, we have 2 fishing cabins. I think we'd have probably one more and we can probably fit it in kind of right here. So then that gives us good spacing. If you rented the cabin, 1 out of 3, like they're all relatively close together without being on top of each other. So I think that would be pretty ideal. I think we can benefit from another overlook. I don't know. Maybe we should. We should put it up here. It's not too close, but this is definitely a far better view because of the rock feature, and you get to glimpse the top of the lighthouse. Yeah, I think that's worth getting a little bit close to civilization for it. So now I think we would come out here because the lighthouse would be a big draw, and so I think we could do, instead of this camping site, I think we could do a tent site out here. So let's see what our terrain looks like right here. Not too awful. We want to be a little off the bottom. Well, I think we'll go ahead and grab that and take it down. I would say from here, we're pushing the neighborhood, but we're still on a park side. We're highly developed down. I think it would probably make sense to give this side an access point. So let's kind of split the difference between nodes, and we'll just put the side gate about there. And we're probably gonna have some terrain issues. Yeah, they really built that fence up. Let's just back this thing up just a little bit. How far will it go? Right there. I think that'll work. Plus, it'll give us a little more running room to clean this up where it's not so harsh. And I would say that's pretty close to what we would probably want to max out on. You have a camp here that you can come quickly off of a gate and put a tent up and hang out at the lighthouse. You have a quick access, reasonable hike to a looking viewing deck. And then of course, we'll travel and you can access, everything the park has to offer. And outside of that, I don't think there's a lot more assets that overly make sense for us. We do have a campfire site. We could probably sprinkle those a little bit. Once the paths are in, I think those make more sense to add after the fact, not before, because we kind of lay down the real scenic needs to this place. So let's go ahead and start getting some rows down and start connecting these things. So we have two. I think let's just put them all down without the decorations first. We'll just use the paths, and then kind of see which ones we want to upgrade it to. So let's go ahead and try to figure out the best way in and out and around, and try to work with the terrain the best we can. But at the same time, it's definitely going to do it for us. I think the freeform tool is definitely the best tool for the job when it comes to running organic paths. It just really kind of fits that bill. So we're coming through a little steep, a little hot. Let's see if, we might have to do some of our own adjustment, but I would say we want to kind of work out here. It did, so that takes care of our path, and we can clean up after the fact. So So I think that, other than the fine tune work, kind of takes care of it. We've got a nice little shelter out here in the woods. We have viewing decks. We have fishing cabins, and three of them that are definitely far enough apart that when you rent one, it seems like it was worth it. We have two primary camping sites, and we have a tent out here on this side. So I think that, other than just, kind of coming in, filling in a little bit more, cleaning this up in detail phase and stuff like that, I think this gives us our working park. Out here in front, I do think that, we could add a few things in the detail phase to make it look more, I guess, family friendly, just on the outside when you're visiting this museum. So, but I think that kind of wraps the nature reserve part of the town. I think it just kind of definitely finishes it, makes it look lived in, makes there a reason to come here. Locals really get to benefit from this, and it takes care of a very odd land use and benefits our overall city. So from there, I think we can jump right here and kind of do the same thing, but just not in a nature reserve setting. But I think we can really take advantage of this little piece of land that I don't know what else you'd actually do with it. All right, so let's just carve ourselves out a kind of a place to work with. So we want to definitely stay above the water line. It's already super low, but and so that kind of brings us in. So let's grab a few of these parks up, and they are somewhere here. So these are the after dark, water-based. So let's kind of think about what we want to put in, because this is definitely more going to be like a town maintenance type of park, where that one's like a federally national park maintenance. We have some cool options here. We have a fishing pier. First, let's take a glance, since we have topography up. Right here is definitely going to be your only boat lane in if this ever expands into fishing. And if you want to run your route out. So we definitely would not want to interfere with that. So let's come where we're still hitting some of the terrain moving up. And that gives us our first one. We'll probably have to adjust these as close as we can so we don't get flooded, but also the one thing about these assets is they'll sit a mile off where nothing's realistic. But, you're not launching a jet ski off that. I mean, I guess you could. Be one ride, one crazy ride. But let's go ahead and, get us a road in. We'll make a few adjustments here. And as far as a good clean road for it and what kind of makes sense. So we probably want to center these up, actually. Would make a little bit more sense, because where this is an actual fishing pier, you wouldn't want to be too awfully close, and it would really kind of mess up your day fishing. All right, so let's grab a road. I think a good road for this one is probably this road here. All right, so I think that curves pretty well. Let's grab this road, hook to it, and from there, we have a pretty good, somewhat network here. Now, but I think we can still kind of fit a few interesting amenities in. So I think like this sidewalk cafe would look pretty good. Well, not the cafe, it's the restaurant. And I think it would make sense. And I think that height makes sense for here. And kind of want, in a sense, I guess, maybe employee or something like that. Parking. And kind of gives you a little information along with a place to park. But I do think that we'll need through parking. And I think down in this corner, we could add a few amenities for the kids. And it's not a bad playground. It's small. But I think we have, yeah, we have a decent little custom asset here. So we can add that, and you know, that actual small one, there's a few different variations to that thing. So yeah, we can kind of cycle through, see what makes sense for beside the water. That's okay. That's a different type. So I think that'll work. Now let's go ahead and get some water down here. Okay, so now we have our water pipes under the ground. We've kind of hooked up these two pedestrian paths. We have a little bit of direct parking, either for the fishing or both. And we have some dedicated parking back here that would feed the restaurant and kind of feed this whole hub, you know, so we can put a little bit of pathways in detail. But overall, you know, I think once this is detailed up, it's going to look like a real piece of the community. And because we can definitely work our bank side and tighten our heights and kind of clean up our hillside and terrains and add some fun props and just anything for the realism and depth that we always want to shoot for. So, you know, and then fix that kind of stuff. It looks like as the water's moving and fluxing, it's kind of grabbing that up. Plus, that thing's about half underground anyway. We can raise that up slightly right now just to solve that. And then we can kind of adjust the rest in detail. So, you know, I think the one last thing that's worth touching, just to kind of give that sense of town completion a little bit more, because, you know, it's always going to have stuff to do, and there's always going to things you're going to need to add or redevelop. But this is an odd gap that just, I think, could be resolved pretty easily and pretty quickly. So we'll kind of reshape our landscaping just a hair. Put that back here and get rid of that one. So let's extend our parking lot a little bit, and let's get a few of our snap twos back on so we know where we're headed. And I'd say that's more than enough. So let's add a couple businesses. I don't want to go crazy. I don't want it to look out of just completely out of line and just doesn't fit the bill. But I do think just a couple. So let's add maybe 3 businesses here and 2 here. And you know, I think we have quite a few reasonable options here for it. AutoZone being one. But instead of making that thing just sit on the front, let's add a little parking lot. We'll leave the middle, and I think we could come up to about the same point and add a little parking lot here. So having done that, I think we could add, doesn't like it, so we'll put it there. And we'll grab it, bring it over here, and kind of, say we could leave a little gap. It's not happy right now. Let's tighten that up. We don't need a ton of parking. It is just an AutoZone. Yeah, I'm sure there's some giant AutoZones out there, but not this one. Then, I think Wendy's, since it already has a McDonald's in there, kind of makes sense. So we'll just center this thing up a little bit. And it has its own parking, so it can sit on the front. And then I think we can kind of put a small chain restaurant in. And it kind of deserves a little more parking. So I think that'll take care of it. It's outside of the water. So let's add that. I'm not going to connect that. It's well connected. And it's private. So here, I think, we have a car wash way over there. And, but we don't really have one on this side. So let's find our car wash real quick. It's right there. And I don't want to take the tree out, so I'll just put it there and move it here in a minute. And I think this building reminds me, while I don't know what it's actually pushing. Oh, it's a pool hall. It's a bowling alley. Oh, that's cool too. I was going to say it reminisces a small bank to me a little bit, but I think that works just as well. And we're not in banking at the moment. I think we still have a good little ways to open that up. So I think we'll be fine without immediate parking. You wouldn't need parking for this. You would for this if you're going to treat it as a bowling alley, but I think we can kind of make believe a little bit. So other than that, I think the rest of it would just come into detail. So because I think this is enough to fill it out, keep it a small town vibe on it, but also, make it not seem unfinished with a big empty field. I think we're at that stage right now that we can go ahead and move straight into detail. And once we kind of run a detail pass, we'll be able to see a little bit better on how things take shape and how the finished result looks. Okay, well, I think that kind of takes care of the detail phase and kind of gets things kind of sitting in a good place. This is one of those builds that a lighter touch in the detail phase is sometimes more valuable than trying to just laying props and things at it. Little town parks like this, town maintained and stuff like that, it's going to be somewhat minimal, but and I kind of like the minimalistic trees we already had in here, so I just kind of added some basic shrubbery. Now I did add the rock, and I think that kind of really fits what would be here in a sense. And now unfortunately, like stuff like this, it's a little off, but you got to really be in here to pick up on it. And it's just kind of the curse of these assets a little bit. You can get them right. I mean, you sit here for an hour and a half and really touch the heights and because really what you run into a lot of times when you try to get super perfect on stuff like that is the building ends up flooding, and if it doesn't flood, it ends up bringing, like we see the wave moving here. So if you hit that right sweet spot, that it looks great, and then this region floods, so it's kind of most of the time, as a player, even in a city tour, you're a little further out, so you don't really pick up on it. I'm good with that. So Walmart, I did end up adding a building. Kind of forgot about this building. I think it's while it doesn't have storefronts, that type of detail, it's a good little unique building to add. Now at some point, we could make it functional if we felt like we needed that kind of pull. Same here, minimalistic while still feeling full. We didn't want to put so much landscape that you can't see the businesses and the businesses behind it, but you also don't want to be blank. So I think that's a good middle ground. Added an extra Walmart sign. That was annoying. Noticed that on the end of the last episode, that when you're coming out of this town, you don't see the sign. It's not a double-sided sign, so just kind of added one to it. Let's mosey into the front door of our national forest now, and our nature reserve. Try to keep it pretty basic, entertaining, in a sense, that there's still things you can do without having to go into the park, and you have your museum and good parking, and then you're getting this. And during the detail phase, we actually already leveled it up. We'd have to turn on districts. So, and it's hitting 12. It's already got 635 visitors. We're in good shape with the entertainment to let that level up. So I think overall, I mean, there's some policies and stuff you can throw at these things, but for now, I think we're not in need, and there's really no real need for this to be a 5-star if it doesn't decide to make it. It's not one of those builds. I mean, I do think, though, you could have easily taken the natural progression path on this nature reserve and gotten it to 5 stars with ease. You have a lot of space. We don't even have that many buildings in here, and we're sitting at a very comfortable entertainment level. So, but overall, when you kind of step back, now, there's things to do. It's kind of there. This town is now maximizing its waterfront shores from a residential and tourist standpoint. And over here is kind of the different take on it in a sense, and I think that works out well. And I think our main town is in a pretty good place to start kind of looking out of town. There's definitely some aspects, some things that we're always going to need to take care of, park maintenance being one of them. Now we have a bunch of parks and we don't actually have park maintenance. Roads are being used pretty heavily. We can take a quick glance at that. We're sitting at 87. I was when I was running in detail, I was this Walmart intersection starting to heat up a little bit. It might end up needing a traffic light, but sitting at 85, 86, when we clicked in, we saw 87. I do think that we're starting to distribute, and, our road network is holding up pretty well. And that's a topic for another day, or maybe even into the sandbox, is just the sheer networking side of it. We have some stubs to leave town with, but that'll redistribute traffic as well a little bit. So we'll see where it goes. But if not, I think I had fun building this today. It was a fun little neat park to use some very unique land that was against the water's edge and let it benefit us. Our tourism, our city of attractiveness went from like 34% to 39 with what we've done today. So, I think we put a good dent into things. So, I think that wraps it up. If, I'd love to hear from you guys. Anything you like, dislike, anything realism, lack of realism, or anything you just see, feel free to drop it in the comments, and we'll see where Ridgewater heads next in the next episode. And I look forward to seeing you then. Thanks for watching.